Alright, what's up guys? This is Ryan from Elevate Security. Now in this video, I will be covering what is definitely one of the most important vulnerabilities to know how to exploit for OSCP and beyond. I would argue that in the real world, this one is probably a little bit less important to know how to exploit just from a pragmatic perspective. However, having an understanding of exploiting a vulnerability like this is absolutely essential for success in the pen testing field. And the vulnerability here that I'm talking about is the infamous Sql Injection Vulnerability. Now, this is one where if you do CTFs, you do OSCP and stuff like that, you're going to see a lot of SQL injections and potential SQL injections. If it doesn't lead to an outright shell, maybe it'll lead to a lot of really critical information that you can then leverage in future parts of your pen test in order to get access to stuff. So this is absolutely crucial to understand. So it's really not that complex as it sounds. Now, I will say, sometimes in the real world, when you do see this, a lot of times nowadays, coders are using, programmers are using parameterized queries and stuff like that to ensure that they're not vulnerable to this vulnerability. However, a lot of times if you do happen to come across some SQL injection in the wild, in the real world, a lot of times it's what's known as blind SQL injection, which is a real pain, let me just tell you, because in blind SQL injection, you're not getting really nice feedback from the server saying, oh, okay, it failed at this line, it failed here, or this is good, we accept this input, we don't accept this input. So instead, what you have to do is something like, okay, if this is a valid SQL statement, please wait 5 seconds and then respond to me. And if it responds to you right away, it's not valid SQL, right? But if it processes that SQL command that says wait 5 seconds and then respond, then you know it was valid SQL. So you have to do some really roundabout kind of logic like that in order to find out, if you're on the right track or not. Now, thankfully for OSCP and most of the CTFs that you're going to encounter, unless they're just like super insane CTFs, you're typically going to have like a non-blind SQL injection where you have this feedback. Now, I will say, even if you don't, you can leverage a tool that I'm going to show you later on in this video called Sql Map to sort of automate the exploitation of SQL injection. Now, when it comes to exploiting SQL vulnerabilities, Sql Map is, unless something's changed, it is pretty much the best tool on the market out there, free tool, like most of these security tools that we use on this channel. Well, all of them on this channel, but most of them that are out there, definitely all of them for OSCP that you would need are all free. But yeah, it is an excellent tool, and it will allow you to really streamline the process. But it's very important that you understand how to manually exploit the SQL injection as well. So that's what I'm going to be starting off with in this video. So let's just get right into it. This is from a box from Hack the Box once again. This one's called Oz. Now, when I go to their standard homepage of their web app here, this is all I'm greeted with is register a username. Now, if let me just go ahead and show you this first, and before I record this whole video just showing me and forgetting about it, right? That would be pretty bad. But yeah, you see, this is the homepage that I'm greeted with. And if I were to run like dir search go buster on it, I would find out that there is a user's endpoint. So the user's endpoint, it wants you to give a user after that. Let's try root, right? So it returned null. So basically what it's doing is it's looking for you to supply it a user, and then it's running a SQL query on the database to see if that user exists in the database. And if it does, it's returning it on the screen. If it doesn't exist, then it's just returning null. So based upon this behavior of the website, we might be on to the fact that there could be some SQL going on in the back end here. So once we get that curiosity, the next step is, well, might this be vulnerable to SQL injection. What if I put a tick mark here, right? Because if you're not familiar, and SQL injection is something just so complex that I couldn't possibly cover everything you would need to know in one video. But definitely stay tuned to this channel. We're going to be attacking a lot of boxes. We're going to come across SQL injection many times. And I'm going to keep teaching you guys more and more about this vulnerability. So don't worry about this. But this tick mark here, right? This is how we can sort of exit out. We can break out of the SQL because, well, let me just illustrate this, right? Let me show you what a basic SQL query looks like. The most basic query that you could possibly have is like select star, meaning everything, from, and then a table name from a table called users, right? Where, or what, yeah. So like, yeah, everything from users where user equals, so what user, right? And then tick marks, and then the user input goes here. And then at the end, they're closing that tick mark, right? So this would work perfectly if you said, oh, user Mark or user Bob or something like that, right? And it's like, okay, let me select everything from users where the user is equal to Bob. Okay, here's Bob's information. Now, where the malicious part comes in is instead of that, you enter this tick mark here. So suddenly, you entered this tick mark here. You just broke out of this part, and you can just keep typing more SQL in this area, right? And it could be malicious SQL, of course. In our case, as the attacker, we'd want to do that. So basically, that's what's going on. So when we put this tick mark here, we're breaking out of this SQL query, and we can start putting in our own SQL. Now let's just see how it responds to this. This is the first red flag here, or green flag. If you're an attacker, it's certainly a green flag. If that tick mark throws an error, the reason it's doing that is if we go back to our example here, you just have three tick marks here. This is not a valid SQL statement. You need another one to make it valid, right? See, now it's a valid SQL statement because what did I do? I just changed it from this to this. Now each one that's opened is also closed, so it's good, right? So this is a really big tip-off that, hey, this is probably vulnerable to SQL injection. Now, I'm going to do the most classic SQL injection exploit on the planet, right? So we're talking about that, right? Here's where our user input goes, right? What if I were to do this to break out of the SQL, and then I said or 1 equals 1, and then I just comment this tick mark out. So now this SQL statement becomes, select everything from users table where the user is equal to blank, or 1 equals 1. And so what's going to happen is 1 always equals 1. So it's just going to give you the first entry in the database. So let's just go ahead and do that, shall we? Now, we're going to have to URL encode this. So an easier way to do this would probably be using burp. So, we put the tick mark here. It produces an error. You can instead say or 1 equals 1. And then this is how you comment: 2 dashes, a space, and another dash. This is a MySQL comment. So if this is MySQL, then this should be a valid statement. Let's just see. We're going to have to URL encode this, though. So let's just highlight this, Control U, and it'll do it for us. That's why I wanted to use burp, really handy for that. And there you go. You see, we do get the first entry in the database. In this case, it is Dorothy. It's a user on the system. But because of this, we can tell 100% this is vulnerable to SQL injection. We're straight up executing our own SQL. Now, before I jump into the SQL map and the automated exploitation here, and this video might go a little bit long, just to, well, you guys know how long the video is. I don't right now, but yeah, this is definitely worth watching here. So in this one, right, we can expand upon this, and because by default this exploit gives us the first entry in the database. Now, what we could do is what was it? What we could do is instead say, or 1 equals 1, we'll shift the tick marks over here, and we will give it a space, and we'll say limit, and then another space, 0, which is the 0 here corresponds to the line returned, the first line. We don't want the first line, we want the second line. So it starts at an index of 0. So 1 would be the second line. And then comma, and then the second number corresponds to the number of lines returned. We'll just return 1 line, right? So if we do this, then it should give us the second entry. Let's see. If we did this correctly. Oh, well, of course, we have to URL encode this, without a doubt. And yeah, let's see. We might have some kind of error here. Let's just take a look. Or 1 equals 1. Let's replace this with %20. All these plus signs here. And let's see how that works. Okay, yeah, and there you see we have Tin Man now. And, you know, we could just keep on going through this list here. We can do this one for the third entry, wizard.oz, and yeah, there you go. That's how we can just keep manually sort of gathering information through SQL injection. Now, actually, since this video has gotten quite long, in the next video, I'm going to show you the automated way to exploit SQL injection, but it's really important. Thanks for sticking around thus far. If you have, for the manual exploitation of SQL injection, it's really important to understand it before you just fire off tools at it, script kiddie style. And definitely you want to confirm the SQL injection first manually, and then you can go about doing it the automated way. So, yep, in the next video, we will be tackling that. So if that sounds of interest to you, definitely be sure to subscribe for that content, hit the like button and bell notifications so you can be notified when that video goes live. But until next time, guys, if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them down in the section below.